What if I told you that an election in Canada, yes, quiet, polite, maple-loving Canada, just rattled global politics, not with weapons, not with war, but with one vote that changed how the world sees power, politics, and alliances? In 2025, Canadians went to the polls and made a choice. A choice that wasn't just about healthcare, taxes, or housing. It was about how their country should stand on the world stage. And the world noticed. This video isn't just about Canadian politics. It's about how 10 countries are now dealing with the consequences of that election, from trade wars to diplomatic standoffs, and everything in between. Number 10, United States. The US was hit hardest, not militarily, not economically, but diplomatically. Under President Trump's second term, things got rocky between Canada and the US. Trump's comments about annexing parts of Canada weren't taken as jokes north of the border, and his reimposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. They stirred resentment. So when Canadians voted in 2025, they voted against that pressure. Mark Carney's rise was partly fueled by a clear promise. Canada will not be pushed around. Now, instead of easy cooperation, we're seeing tougher negotiations, colder meetings, and a clear signal from Ottawa. Canada is pulling away from America's shadow. Trade is slowing, cross-border talks are tense, and the once solid friendship, it's being redefined. Number 9. India. The fallout with India isn't just political, it's emotional. After the killing of Sikh separatist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in British Columbia, Canada accused Indian agents of involvement. India denied it, but the damage was done. Diplomats were expelled. Visa offices were shut down. Indian officials called Canada a hub for anti-India elements. Canadians of Indian origin, especially Sikhs, suddenly found themselves caught in a storm they didn't start. When the election happened, Canada's new government didn't back down. Instead, it promised more transparency and more action on foreign interference. Now, trade talks are frozen. Student visas from India have dropped. And for the first time in years, India and Canada are seeing each other more as rivals than partners. Number 8. Pakistan. Pakistan might not have been expecting to be dragged into Canadian headlines, but it was. In the weeks before the election, Canadian intelligence flagged multiple attempts by foreign actors to disrupt or influence public opinion. Among them, Pakistan. The claim wasn't taken lightly. Ottawa didn't call it war, but they did call it a threat. Diplomatic channels between the two nations were quickly clogged with denials, accusations, and warnings. The election hardened Canada's stance on interference from abroad, and Pakistan's name now appears in more security briefings than in trade agreements. Aid reviews are underway, partnerships are being reevaluated, and trust? That's going to take years to rebuild. Number 7. China-Canada's complicated dance with China just got even more unpredictable. For years, tensions brewed over detained Canadians, trade disputes, and human rights issues. The 2025 election brought in a government that wants to reduce reliance on both the US and China. But cutting ties with one superpower often means leaning on another, and Beijing knows this. China responded by slowing down Canadian imports and warning its citizens about travel to Canada. Meanwhile, Canada banned several Chinese tech companies from its infrastructure projects. The relationship isn't broken, but it's definitely fractured. And if Canada moves closer to alliances like AUKUS or leans more toward Taiwan in the future, China's response might not stay diplomatic. Number 6. Australia. Australia and Canada have always shared a kind of quiet friendship, two big, stable democracies in unpredictable regions. But now, that relationship is turning strategic. Australia watched Canada's election closely, especially as both countries faced pressure from China and experienced interference in their democratic systems. With Carney in office, Australia sees a like-minded partner. Since the election, the two countries have ramped up intelligence sharing and are even exploring deeper military cooperation in the Pacific. The world is getting messier, and for Australia, having Canada step up is good news. Number 5. France is leaning in with open arms. After the election, French President Emmanuel Macron was one of the first world leaders to call Carney and express support. Why? Because both leaders are trying to build a centrist, climate-focused, democratic alternative to populist politics. Macron sees Canada as a partner in fighting disinformation, standing up to authoritarian influence, and leading green energy transitions. Trade negotiations with the EU have restarted. Cultural partnerships are expanding, and in many ways, France now sees Canada as its most important ally outside of Europe. Number 4. Mexico. Mexico didn't get involved in Canada's election, but it's definitely feeling the aftershocks. With US-Canada relations cooling, Mexico's left wondering how future trilateral talks under the USMCA will go. And with Canada taking a harder stance on border policies and labor standards, Mexico may face pressure on migration and manufacturing deals. At the same time, there's opportunity. If Canada shifts its supply chains away from China and the US, Mexico could benefit, as long as the political climate stays stable. Mexico's leadership is walking a fine line. Stay neutral, stay open, and try not to get caught in the middle of a North American cold front. Number 3. United Kingdom Canada's family ties to the UK go back centuries, but lately they've been strained. The Canada-India fallout dragged London into an awkward position. The UK has close ties with both countries and didn't want to pick sides. But when Canada's new government doubled down on its accusations, British politicians had to speak up. Behind the scenes, there are quiet concerns that Canada's tough stance might endanger broader Commonwealth unity. But publicly, the UK is staying supportive, at least for now. What Britain really wants is to revive its post-Brexit trade deal with Canada. And if that means swallowing some diplomatic discomfort, so be it. Number 2. European Union. For the European Union, Canada's election was an opportunity, a chance to strengthen ties with a democratic, resource-rich country that shares its values on climate, tech, and human rights. The new government in Ottawa is eager to cooperate with Europe on green energy, digital regulation, and supply chain security. In response, the EU is moving quickly to finalize long-delayed trade and data agreements with Canada. And unlike its relationship with the US, Europe feels like Canada is willing to listen, compromise, and lead together. With populism rising elsewhere, the EU sees Canada as a critical ally in defending liberal democracy. Number 1. Russia. Russia hasn't said much about Canada's election, but it doesn't need to. Moscow knows that Canada's a NATO member, a G7 country, and one of the most vocal critics of its actions in Ukraine. But now, with Canada trying to distance itself from US influence, Russia sees a possible crack in the alliance. It's subtle, but real. Russian state media has already begun suggesting that Canada is becoming disillusioned with American imperialism. It's propaganda, of course, but it shows that Russia is watching, and any perceived weakness in North American unity, Russia is ready to exploit it.